But why is NASA and the U.S. government hiding the first HD images of the 3I Atlas, this interstellar object, from all of us? This mysterious object just flew right by Mars on October 3rd and 4th, and NASA has some of the most advanced satellite images and satellites orbiting Mars, and reconnaissance instruments that are actually tracking this object. Astronomers were able to process data from the Mars Perseverance Rover that gave low resolution images of 3I Atlas on October 3rd and 4th, but high resolution images from the orbiters have still not been released by NASA. Why? What are they hiding? Dr. Michael Salla, who writes over at exopolitics.org, has been tracking this story. He's been tracking 3I Atlas now for months and joins me now to talk about it. Doc, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks. I'm glad to talk about this really perplexing issue.
It is perplexing because let's just put up here on the screen. This is video of the Mars cameras here. You know, this is just a rendering here, but there's plenty of these high-resolution satellites taking photos that are orbiting Mars, that are right there on Mars, not to mention the Mars Perseverance Rover that's on the planet. Why have NASA not released these images?
Well, it's part of a pattern that NASA has been doing for decades now, going to all of its Mars orbiters and the International Space Station. What would happen typically is that many of these cameras were often oriented and would provide a live feed, and then anomalies would be seen on Mars or in space around the International Space Station. And so NASA decided that what it would do is that it would kind of like pretty much prevent or stop the live feeds and would go to a kind of delayed release of images where their photo image experts would process the images. But what we know from whistleblowers, and here we go back to 2001 with Donna Hare and Carl Wolf, who were two whistleblowers that appeared in the Disclosure Project press conference, is that what NASA would do is that it would scrub images that contained any evidence of extraterrestrial life. So this is what was really happening with these delays. So NASA would go from live feeds or would cut a live feed, and then it would delay the release of images, and that would give time for its photo image experts to remove anything in there that was suggestive of extraterrestrial life. And I think what we're having now with the Mars orbiters, with 3I Atlas passing its perihelion with Mars, it's about 30 million kilometers away from Mars, so that's the closest point it gets to Mars. Some of the Mars orbiters, two of them are NASA orbiters, two are European Space Agency, another one is Chinese, and another one is the United Arab Emirates. So they could take images of the 3I Atlas, but so far, as you already said, what was released on October 3rd was this very low resolution image from the NavCam of the Mars Perseverance Rover, which is really just a camera oriented for the Mars rover to be able to navigate the Mars surface. So you would see the kind of horizon, and you would see stars or objects in the background. So that's what that fuzzy image from the Mars Perseverance Rover showed. And so that was that was a live feed, and that was processed by amateur astronomers. So, I mean, it does show that amateur astronomers can process and release live feeds from NASA. But when it comes to the Mars orbiters, there is no live feed of what is happening in deep space. I mean, we really have to rely on NASA and the European Space Agency to point their cameras towards any object and then release it. But just today, the European Space Agency did release something.
What do you think? I mean, people, obviously speculating about this thing for quite a while now. it has been doing some very uncharacteristic things of a normal comet. So why are people so fascinated by this object particularly? And do you think that it's anything nefarious, anything unexplainable, or just simply an interstellar object that's behaving differently than perhaps a normal, a normal object would? Maybe there's some sort of a pattern with it. I don't know. But what do you make of this? Someone in the chat, Eddie Schwab in our chat, says this thing looks like the Doomsday Machine from Star Trek. Yes, from the 1960s episode called The Doomsday Machine. It looks exactly like that, kind of like this long cylindrical looking object.
Well, from the get-go, when it was discovered back in July of this year by the Atlas telescope system, what it showed was that this was on a path that was like within 5 degrees of the ecliptic, which is very unusual, and that it would pass close by several major planets. And some astronomers did statistical studies and found that this was very highly unusual and suggestive of some kind of intelligent navigation that was behind this to kind of follow that passage. The lack of a tail is really the most kind of like startling aspect of 3I Atlas, that this is no comet. And this is something that you can see in the very latest, the most recent image that just came out today from the European Space Agency that shows, and I think I sent you a GIF file of 3I Atlas from the ExoMars European Space Agency orbiter that shows a kind of dot. But what's interesting is that there's no tail. And that's very important, because if this was a comet right now, as 3I Atlas is approaching the sun, you would see a tail behind it as it's approaching the sun. But there's no tail. So that's suggestive of something other than a comet that has traveled from some interstellar region to here. And so this is where we get into a lot of speculation. I mean, many different sources are saying that this is an extraterrestrial spacecraft that is here to really kind of like raise the frequencies of the planet or of the solar system. And some say it's associated with white hats that want to kind of like break the disclosure secrecy. So, there's a lot of speculation about it, but still, the fact is that right now it's very close to Mars, relatively speaking, in astronomical terms, and that the images that are being released, I mean, NASA hasn't released anything yet due to the government shutdown, and that's another factor that people are pointing to, that this is more than coincidental, that just as 3I Atlas approaches Mars, gets to its perihelion, NASA goes into shutdown mode. Is that accident? Is that coincidental? And people are also speculating about the generals being summoned to the Pentagon. I mean, were they really there just to be lectured to in terms of how the woke agenda is no longer suitable in the Pentagon or the Department of War? Or were they being secretly given operational briefings talking about a planetary crisis if it becomes clear that 3I Atlas is a spacecraft and is carrying extraterrestrials who are associated not just with Mars in its ancient past, but also with Earth in terms of underwater colonies. And that's something that would be of great concern to Pentagon generals.
Yeah, it's just so strange, because I've read reports about the way that it's, the elliptic tracking, the way that it's come in, it'd just be nearly impossible. I mean, basically like fractions of a percentage point likelihood that this would ever happen, to be going on this particular path, as you point out. And I mean, I guess the universe is vast enough that there's a chance, right? There's absolutely a chance. I mean, people do win the lottery after all. There is a chance, right? So I guess in that situation it could be. But also the other question is about NASA not releasing these photos is that, well, there's a government shutdown. So maybe all these guys are just off. You know, they're not making any money right now. They're just non-essential employees of the government. So they're just not interested in releasing any of these photos to us right now because they're at home. What do you make of that?
Well, that's the explanation that we're getting from NASA, that it's really just a matter of the government shutdown, and that people that would be normally working on these images and then releasing them to the general public are essentially kind of like unemployed at the moment, or at least on furlough or something like that. But if you look at the entire history of 3I Atlas and the cursory way in which NASA has used its equipment to study 3I Atlas, you'll notice that, I mean, there's been a pattern of really ignoring it. I mean, all you have is there's one image from the Hubble telescope. There's one image from the James Webb Space Telescope. We know that the Juno mission, which is a NASA mission, which has been operating near Jupiter for well over a decade, which could have been used to photograph 3I Atlas as it approaches Jupiter, in December, that has been deactivated just before 3I Atlas arrives in the vicinity of Jupiter. And so you have to kind of like ask yourself, well, is that coincidental? I mean, you have a government shutdown 3 days before the 3I Atlas achieves perihelion with Mars, and then you have the Juno spacecraft, its cameras being turned off literally a week before 3I Atlas starts to appear in an area of the sky close to Jupiter. So you look at all of this, and I think the conclusion is that NASA is not really releasing its best images, or even making an effort to release its best imagery of 3I Atlas to the general public. That whatever imagery is being gained, the best imagery is definitely happening in classified programs, but NASA is doing very little to educate the public about 3I Atlas. So it's left to amateur astronomers and observers to kind of like really speculate as to what's really going on.
You recall we talked about this, I think, months ago here on the show. Jeremy Corbell, back in January, is on camera talking about how they will push this idea of like a fake alien invasion on us, and they will talk about some large interstellar object that's coming towards us. That's the story that they're going to use to try to scare us. So turning off these cameras, NASA not releasing photos. Do you think it's all part of this game, or do you think it's a separate story that Jeremy might have been talking about?
No, I think it is part of that preparation. I mean, it's really trying to get the public interested in 3I Atlas, but giving it very little information that could educate people about what's really going on. And then you have NASA astronomers, prominent astronomers, such as Dr. R.V. Loeb from Harvard. They're proposing this dark forest theory, which is the idea that interstellar space is very dangerous, and that any alien civilization that would send probes here would do so on the assumption that it's entering a hostile environment, and so it would be prepared to act in a hostile way to defend itself or deal with that environment. And so I think we do get to this kind of possibility that people have been talking about for decades now, which is the false flag alien invasion, that an object like 3I Atlas could be kind of the precursor, or could be made the fulcrum of some kind of attempt to fool the public that we are under some kind of invasion. And certainly there's I totally believe that there are positive extraterrestrials out there that are monitoring us and want to interact with us. But I think that there are those within the government apparatus, the deep state, ruling bloodline families, whatever you want to call them, that want to prevent that. And their way of doing that is to use their mainstream media assets and assets within the legislative bodies of major governments to make the public believe that we would be invaded rather than friendly extraterrestrials making contact.
Well, someone just gave a compliment, said, hey, this is kind of like Redacted in the afternoons can cover sort of the coast-to-coast AM stuff. You don't have to wake up at 3 in the morning. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. Because I grew up, loving Coast to Coast, and I love these stories, and I want to get to the bottom of this, just like Dr. Michael Salla does. You have to read Dr. Sala's great works, read his incredible books, visit his work over at exopolitics.org. Love having Dr. Salla on, who spent many decades as a professor and started to really try to seek the answers here. So really appreciate it. Doc, great to have you here on the show as always.
Thank you.